Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us. We're very excited about today's webinar, Taming the Clip Art Monster with Dayton Children's Hospital. I'm Jody Schelt. I'm a Senior Marketing Manager here at MarcomCentral, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. I'll be taking the questions and moderating as well. Our featured speaker today is Kim Bailey-Quill. She's the Patient Family Communications Coordinator at Dayton Children. So we're very excited to have her here. Welcome, Kim. All right, just a couple of reminders before we get started. We are recording this webinar and we will send you the recording after the presentation, so keep an eye out for that in your email inbox. You can share it with your colleagues and watch it again at a later date if you'd like. We would love to take your questions, so if you have any throughout the presentation, go ahead and submit those in the chat box and we'll get to those at the end during our Q&A session. If we don't get to those questions, if we run out of time for some reason, I will follow up with you after to make sure those get answered. All right, so we just wanted to give you a brief overview of MarcomCentral. MarcomCentral provides a marketing asset management portal for companies of all sizes and across industries. The MarcomCentral platform allows companies to organize, customize, and distribute content easily. The company is headquartered in Solana Beach, California. It's just north of San Diego. And in that nice picture to the right, you can see we're not too far from the beach, so we're very lucky. The company was founded in 2000 and has been growing ever since, and we're about at 100 employees now. So we're very lucky to have wonderful clients like Dayton Children's Hospital who have overcome their own marketing challenges and are willing to share their knowledge with us. So we're very excited to have Kim, and like I said, she's going to get started with her presentation now. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. As Jody said, I am Kim Quill. Let me open up the presentation again. And I'm from Dayton Children's Hospital. So we are a standalone pediatric hospital in Dayton, Ohio. We have 6 off-site facilities and 2 campuses, one in downtown Dayton and one a little bit south of town in the suburbs. We have about 85,000 annual visits to our emergency department. So just to give you an idea of how many patient families we touch from that perspective, and obviously that does not include any inpatient visits or any of our outpatient ambulatory clinic visits. And we have about 3,100 employees. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of our rebranding and then the need for a system like our MarcomCentral portal. I'll talk a little bit about how we decided on MarcomCentral and then how we decided to set up our system. I'll talk about the trainings that we did with employees, our new patient family communications process, and then give you a few screenshots of what our system actually looks like, and then future goals. So in March of 2016, we launched a new brand. So up to this point, we had announced this new patient tower in 2013 and realized after doing some brand studies with the arrival of this new patient tower and what kind of needs would need to be met with it, we realized that the perception that the community had just really did not match with what was going on inside our walls. So we had hired 60 new subspecialists. We were offering this really transformative care, really high quality care, and we were still being seen as kind of the community hospital that could fix a broken arm, but that you would not take your kid to for brain surgery. So the rebranding was kind of to help change that perception, and then also to represent this innovation that was happening while still staying true to our roots in Dayton and reaffirming that children were really at the center of everything we do. So on the right, you can see our new logo. It's a whirligig. And if you want more information about that, I'm happy to tell you more about it, but it's a little nod to the Wright brothers, and you can see more about it on our website if you're interested. So as I said, our new brand was announced in March of 2016, and then we had a lot of work to do. So the new patient tower opened almost exactly 1 year ago today, and with the opening of the tower, we asked employees to give us some words that they would use to describe the new aesthetic of these spaces. So you can see that these new spaces are very clean, bright, sophisticated, innovative, child-friendly, and inviting. So really just beautiful spaces, very child-friendly while still being kind of high-end and sophisticated. So in contrast to that, these were the kind of materials that we had that we were giving to our patient families. So when asked to describe these materials, our employees said words like inconsistent, unprofessional, confusing, not on brand. So kind of the polar opposite of what they were saying about all of our new spaces in that new patient tower. The other thing that we noticed, particularly from a marketing perspective, was just the writing of these pieces. So when you have, hundreds of different nurses and physicians and more clinical people writing things, you don't have a consistent voice, and you also don't necessarily write in a style that is easy to understand for people that are not in the medical world. So we ended up with a lot of materials that were really high reading level and then just didn't have a consistent voice. So we needed some way to bring all these materials into our new brand, and then also change the writing style of them from kind of clinical to more educational. So that's kind of how we ended up at MarcomCentral. So we signed with MarcomCentral in July of 2016 with the goals of number one, consistency. So as you can see in these this last slide, all of these materials look completely different. There's really no way to know that they're all coming from the same hospital very quickly. You could read into it a little bit and see that they say Dayton Children somewhere, but the brand is not consistent at all. So that was our number one goal. We also wanted our employees to be able to order static materials, so things that didn't really have any changes, and then create custom materials that were on brand. We also had a lot of issues with clip art, hence the name of this session. So we wanted to provide approved on-brand photos. So no more Googling images and dropping in whatever you find on the internet. We wanted to give you a bank of approved images that marketing had either taken or had paid for and was able to use. And then we wanted it to be a seamless Amazon-like experience. So like any other online shopping, we wanted this to kind of be the same experience and feel familiar. So as we started to launch our Marcom system, we call it our Brand Resource Center, and we really wanted this to be a one-stop shop for our employees to be able to access anything they would need from a marketing perspective. So you can see that we have the View Brand Guidelines, so that's a link to our brand standards website. We have a few different ways that you can actually access the materials that are in the site. We also have a logo-wear store where employees can go to buy their uniforms, and then also fun things like coffee mugs and things like that. We have a form that you can fill out if you need marketing services, so that's listed on there too, and then FAQs for any questions that you might have about the site. So we have two major user groups. One is our employees, and then one is our referring physician offices. So they have a little bit of a different experience, just different tiles basically, but pretty much everything else is the same. We divided up a lot of our materials by clinic, and then we do have some house-wide things, but we kind of thought through that before we got started too. We have a few different printers that we use, so there was a lot of time spent working with them to figure out how to get them up and running on Marcom, and then figure out things like delivery time frames and how were they going to deliver? Would they be bringing things over, one by one, or would they be mailing things? So that was a big initiative on our end too. And then figuring out what the first materials would be. So I'm going to jump to the next slide at this point. Oh, yep, let's go forward. So setting our objectives. So our goals within the first 6 months were to add 300 materials and 10 templates, to train one representative from 80% of our clinics or departments, and then to have 80% of the people that came to the sessions to respond to the training as very helpful. So when we actually launched the Brand Resource Center, it was in December of 2016, and we started with business cards and stationery. We often say that our employees push our brand out more than any efforts we do in marketing. So the business cards were a really good opportunity to get our new brand out there and being used without having to upload, hundreds of patient education materials. Then we finally did start to add patient-family materials in January of 2017. So to roll this out to employees, we did a handful of different employee training sessions. So we did 4 in-person sessions between February 28th and March 17th. So in that time, we had about 200 employees come to these different sessions. And in them, we talked about how to use the Brand Resource Center. So just walking through how to create a static material, how to create a templated material, how to check out, all that good stuff. And then the patient-family communications process. So prior to having a system like our Brand Resource Center, all of our clinics created their own materials whenever they wanted on whatever kind of template they wanted. So as I showed you before, that led to tremendous amounts of inconsistency, lots of spelling and grammar errors, just things that we did not want out in our community. So as part of the new process, we outlined how to use the system to get what you need. We showed the value of having a consistent brand for patient-family materials. And then we also talked with them about how to submit a request for something if they weren't able to find it on the Brand Resource Center. And then finally, we went over our signage policy. So we used to have posters and flyers and brochures scattered all over the hospital. So if you came into a clinic, you might see 50 different, not 50, probably 10 different brochures sitting out on the counter of that clinic, and it was really distracting, and you didn't really know where to look. You didn't know which one to look at or to pick up. It looked sloppy. The papers started to flop over, as they do when they've been hanging in a brochure or literature holder for too long. So just really not the aesthetic we were going for. So in these sessions, we also talked about our new policy, which is essentially no signs anywhere and nothing out on the counters. And we actually put in digital signs across the hospital, so we can now put some of that information up on those monitors rather than having it sitting out on a counter. So all those things were covered in these employee training sessions. So once we announced the rebranding and kind of dove into the process of getting rid of all of our old stuff and then launching all this new stuff, again, consistency is key. We wanted to make sure that anything that was being created moving forward had the new brand, and we wanted to make sure that anything that was being given out before was all rebranded. And that was a tremendous amount of work in itself. We're talking, thousands of materials that had to be redone. As I said, the signage policy was discussed in those employee training sessions, and we actually went around to different areas of the hospital, we being marketing, and kind of did an audit to see what areas still had things hanging around that they shouldn't have. So we were able to meet with the clinics kind of one-on-one and discuss the new policy and why it was important that they follow it. We also created a form on our intranet to submit items for rebranding. So if we missed something in people's clinic, or if they just saw something around the hospital that had the old logo on it, they were able to submit it through this form, again, on our intranet. And then we did this fun Dump the Junk campaign. So we actually had a vendor help us with the patient move into our new tower, and this was something that they had suggested to us. But basically, we had dumpsters in what we call offstage areas that patient families do not go, where they could bring all of their old materials. And then if they submitted a picture of themselves getting rid of their old materials to our intranet person, they could win a new logoed item. So these are some of the photos of some of our different teams dumping their old junk. And that was a fun way to get our staff engaged, and it wasn't as maybe bossy as saying throw everything out. It was kind of a more fun way of handling that. And we have a lot of hoarders at Dayton Children's too, so we needed something fun to get people to get rid of all their things. So this is the outcome from those training sessions. So we were able to add about 300 items and 10 templates within the first 6 months of launch. We actually had 90% of our departments represented at trainings, and that was everything that included everyone from clinicians, so nurses and nurse educators, to administrative staff and employee experience, which is our human resources department. And then we sent out a survey after these sessions, and 83.3% responded that the training was very helpful and that they were excited to go share this information with their coworkers. So we were really pleased with the outcomes of those training sessions and think that it was a good way to show them the new brand and the value of consistency in the new branding. So current state, and these numbers are actually even a little off. We have a lot more now even. So we're up to about 800 static materials. We've had 3,000 orders placed since we launched, again, in November of 2016, really December. We now are up to 50 templates created, so we've been working a lot with Marcom to get those up and running and are continuing to add more as time goes. And we now have 300 employees trained on the Brand Resource Center, so that's about, what, a tenth of our employees. So we're very pleased with that. And we don't expect that all of our employees go in the system. Not everybody has a need to, but it does, you can tell that people are now referring to the Brand Resource Center first and then coming to us via email or phone when they can't find what they need on the site. So we're very, very pleased with those outcomes. So this is a quick kind of snapshot of what our system looks like. As you can see, it's pretty right on brand for us. So we've got that light blue wave, which is kind of our signature look with the new brand. The top picture is our checkout process. And then we have a picture of one of our vertical image flyer templates. And it's a little hard to see, but there's a link to our photo gallery, and that's where this picture of the kids eating is from. There are about 300 pictures in there of approved images that are just more sophisticated than any kind of clip art you'd be finding from Google. And then you can see a little bit the different folder set, the way that we've set up our folders by clinic. Okay, so future goals. We've obviously done a lot already, but there's still a lot we want to do. We feel like we've kind of just scratched the surface with Marcom, and we have a lot of future goals. So the first is to increase repeat site visits. So like I said, not all of our employees need to be on the site, but we want the ones who are on the site to be coming back a lot. And the reason for that is because one is because of the hoarding. So we want them to store what they need and not boxes and boxes of what they don't. So we hope that they come back frequently and order smaller quantities of materials rather than ordering hundreds of materials that they won't go through quickly. We also release new products pretty frequently, so we want to make sure that they're coming back and are able to see those. We're actually in the middle of implementing the advanced search function right now. So thank you to our Marcom team for helping to get that up and running. We also would like to do focus groups with some of our top users for new templates. So we've kind of determined what the needs were as we were inventorying all of the items that had to be rebranded. We created the templates that we thought would be most beneficial, but obviously there are certainly many templates that may be needed that we haven't thought of yet. So we want to do those focus groups to try to figure that out. We'd also like to do online training development. Right now, we do all of this training in person, and it would be nice for me not to have to spend the time to do that and to do something online. And something that could also be kind of automatically assigned through our learning management system, so that, you know, certain people in certain roles would have to take this training as part of their onboarding process. And then just ongoing template refinement. So like I said, we have about 50 templates up there right now, and we're constantly making adjustments to help meet the needs of our business owners and our staff in general. And that is all.
Thanks, Kim. That's great. It sounds like a lot of work went into this project. And that actually goes into one of our first questions about the rebranding part. How long did the rebrand take you guys?
So we launched the new brand, like I said, in March of 2016, and we are still working on it. So I'd say we're about 98% done. Really, the bulk of it was done within a year, but we're still finding things today that have the old brand on it. And from my perspective, so I'm in charge of patient-family communications, and that was probably 75% of the materials that had to be redone. So we had to rewrite and rebrand about 750 materials in a year, and I'm one person. So there's still some clinics that are outlying, but for the most part, we finished it all in a year.
Okay. The next question, as a reminder, we are in the Q&A portion now of the presentation. So if you have those questions, go ahead and enter them in the chat box. So our next question, do you have a review or approval process for materials the users create?
Great question. Yes, we do for most of our templates. So anything that's more complicated than like an invitation comes to me for approval before it gets printed by our print shop.
Okay. And then another question about the rebranding. How did MarcomCentral assist with the rebranding of static materials? Did they develop branded templates and dump the existing content in?
So for the most part, we used freelance designers. We have an in-house designer, but due to the volume, we had to hire a few freelance designers too. And part of the reason for that was when you launch a new brand, it takes some time to kind of get familiar with it and figure out how you really want things to look and flow. And that was a little bit easier to do with a person than it would have been with a system. So now that we're through the rebranding and for the most part, like I said, and are kind of on the other side of it, we're actually starting to turn to Marcom more for templates, but at the time, and again, just due to volume and tweaks that would need to be made and pictures that we had to include of different body parts for our nurses, it was kind of easier to go with freelancers in the beginning and just load all those materials onto Marcom rather than using the templates for all of them. There was just a lot of variation in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next question, how long did the research take to determine you needed a new logo?
Oh, that's a good question too. So they actually announced it right before I started. So I kind of came on and they were like, okay, we're rebranding, good luck. But I believe it was a pretty quick process. So I'd say maybe 6 months, and that might even be a little bit generous. It was really quick. I don't know that that's standard, but if you have more specific questions about that, I'm happy to kind of take that offline and pass you along to our team member who knows a lot more about that than I do.
Okay, and also follow up to that one, other than the logo, was there a new tagline and messaging that was to be communicated as well?
Yeah, so right after we announced the logo, we did create a new tagline, and above and beyond is what we decided on. It's kind of woven in with our logo, and we do use it in some materials too. So that was, we didn't, I guess we did. We had, I think it was like kids are number one or something like that before above and beyond. But that happened probably a few months after the new logo was rolled out.
Okay. A question about imagery. Are these stock photos or? Sorry,
Yes.
I'm on for a second. Are these stock photos or commissioned? Unique to your brand?
Both. So most of the ones that are integrated into our templates right now are stock, and part of the reason for that is that we're trying to get a better handle on our process for making sure that the photos that we're using are within the window of the releases that the family signed. So when they sign a release, it's usually for about 5 years, and our current system is just not easy to figure out how many years it's been. So we have not added a bunch of many commissioned photos yet to the library, but we plan to do that very soon. And on a lot of the materials that our designers are working on, we do use a lot more commissioned photos just because marketing is creating those, and we feel more confident in knowing which ones are okay to use and which ones aren't.
Okay, the next question, how do you control the consistent voice in terms of the copy, the writing materials you're creating? I guess we had another question earlier, and it was about brand guidelines. So did you guys create brand guidelines for that?
Yes, so we have a whole brand guideline site that's actually public. So if you guys want to look at it, it's just brand.childrensdayton.org. So that listed out all the new brand standards and then the history, again, the background behind the whirligig. As far as consistent voice, I write all of them. So that makes it pretty consistent because it's one person. I also have a background in health literacy and plain language standards. So I'm able to kind of take these complicated clinical terms and information and boil it down to information that's easier for patient families to understand.
Okay. The next question is around the printer. So are your printers integrated into the system? Can ordering material be sent directly to the printers from within the system after a templated item is created?
Yes, so all of our static materials go straight to a printer whenever they're ordered. We have primarily three printers, depending on which item you're ordering. So we have an in-house copy center that we use for most of our flyers and brochures, and some of the more simple printing things. We use external vendors for things like stationery. We do a lot of thank you cards and things like that, and those all go to external printers. All three of those printers are integrated into our system. Some of them are more integrated than others, so we have a couple set up on the auto job tickets and one that is not. And that was kind of just the way it happened in the beginning. We certainly want to look at that and figure out if that's still the right way to be set up or not. So that's something that we're looking into now that we're more into an optimization point in our Marcom relationship and brand resource center process.
Okay. Getting a lot of great questions here. Here's another one. How did you encourage employees to buy into the new system, signage policy, and change their ways from what they were used to in the past?
That is a great question that I could probably talk about for 5 hours, but I won't. So one of the things that I was actually telling Jody this right before we started the call today, we actually moved to standardized uniforms. So before that, all of our caregivers wore whatever scrubs they wanted to. So we had people in Mickey Mouse and Frozen attire and, just completely inconsistent. And it looked pretty sloppy. So when we moved to the standard uniform where all nurses wear navy and all PCAs wear teal and all pharmacy techs wear burgundy, it became pretty apparent how much a consistent look makes a difference in the perception of our staff. So it just really elevated us, Dayton Children's, as a hospital in general, and staff were really proud. As my boss says, people were walking around proud as peacocks. They just loved these new uniforms, and that was a big turning point to get kind of the people that were lagging behind on board. The other thing is the history of the whirligig, I think, really brought people in. So as I mentioned, it is a nod to the Wright brothers, and being in Dayton, we're very proud of the fact that that the Wright brothers are from here and that they did a lot of their work here. The whirligig was a toy that was given to the Wright brothers and kind of sparked their interest in innovation, and I think people connected with that story. The other thing is it had been 40 years since we rebranded, and it was just time. Our old one looked really, it just looked old fashioned, and I think people recognized that the new one looked much more modern. And there was so much going on in the hospital that people in the community just did not know about. And the logo change was a really good way to change that perception, and telling that story was really helpful to employees as well. There were still people that just were not happy about it. Some of our volunteers that had been with us for a really long time didn't really understand it. But again, I think by telling the story of how we came up with the new logo and then how it will change perception and help encourage people to bring kids to us who really do have these really complex care needs, that all of that is a really good thing for our community and something that we want to be singing from the rooftops, not kind of quietly doing without much knowledge, external knowledge.
Great. Okay, we have another question. This one is around document formatting. How are you able to maintain consistent document formatting across different computers? And I'm guessing that your creative team and your design team is working on that and then distributing that out. Is that correct?
Yep. So our our in-house designer, in partnership with the agency that helped us do the rebranding, came up with a bunch of different templates that we then sent to these freelance designers that we used. So that really helped to make sure that everybody was on the same page from the very beginning. And then the branding really does not go outside of these few people. So by our internal designer kind of leading the way and then sending out that information to our freelancers, we've been able to keep really good control of the brand.
Okay. Okay, and it looks like we've got one more question here, and that is also around the rebrand. And did you survey employees prior to launching that rebrand process?
That's a good question. Yes. So I think what happened prior to even the idea of rebranding was that we'd sent out a brand study to community members, so just really moms in our community, and then our physicians and our employees. And those three groups were the ones who came back, and that's where we recognized that the perceptions were different than what was actually happening. And then the way that we decided to negate that or change that was through this rebranding process. The other thing, and again, this was all before my time at Dayton Children's, so I'm kind of relaying this from people besides me, but I believe that before we launched the logo externally with the media, we did show it to employees, or we had a couple opportunities for employees to see it. I think that they did focus groups too, so it certainly was not, the marketing team in isolation. There was a lot of input from other stakeholders in the organization too.
Okay. Well, I thought that was our last one, but we had two more come in, Kim. So
okay. No problem.
Okay. How long in terms of session length are the training sessions with your personnel?
They ranged from half an hour to an hour, just kind of depending on what questions were asked. And the first few sessions were really big. We had about 80 people in the first couple of sessions, and then we dropped down to probably about 40 in the third and fourth, and then the ones that we've been doing since then have had about 20. So those first ones, and the first ones were also right in the middle of the rebranding, so it was still a lot of new information to them. Now when people come to these sessions, they're new hires, so they haven't known anything different, so it's a lot easier to get through the trainings and it goes much more quickly. So again, between half an hour and an hour, longer in the beginning.
Okay, and does this system manage your templated email distribution as well? And I know that on the MarcomCentral side, some of our clients do use our marketing automation integrations, but are you guys using that?
We are not.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
not yet.
Yeah, and if that person asked that question wants more information on that, we can follow up with you after. Okay, that looks like it wraps up the questions. Thank you so much, Kim, for your time, and thank you so much to all the attendees for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, bye.
Bye.